Hello, and a very warm welcome to the 23rd session of the Asia Undercurrent webinar series entitled Partnering for a Sustainable and Prosperous Future: How Japan and its partners are cooperating on infrastructure, decarbonization, and beyond in the Global South. My name is Walter Sim, and I'm the Japan correspondent of the Straits Times, which is a Singapore-based English language newspaper. My role here tonight really is to drive a rich exchange of ideas and get our panel of experts talking, but I would also like to get everyone watching this live involved as well by submitting your questions for our panelists. Whether you're watching this on the Nikkei channel or on YouTube Live, please scroll down and you will find a link where you could send in your questions anytime during this live webinar. Please do tell us a little bit about yourself, such as your name if possible, or at least your affiliation and country. To start, I think a discussion about the Global South comes at a very critical juncture amid evolving global dynamics. For one, the very idea of the Global South is generally used to indicate emerging countries in contrast to developed ones, but it also belies a risky assumption that it is one monolithic bloc. The Global South is also increasingly a strategic piece of the puzzle that is the big power competition between the United States and China. And on that note, I would encourage everyone listening in tonight to read the annual China Security Report that was released just this week by the National Institute for Defense Studies, which is the think tank of Japan's Ministry of Defense, because the report this year coincidentally also took a focus on the rising Global South. The rich diversity of the Global South cannot be overstated, and it is obvious that every country naturally has their own national and regional interests. This also means there is plenty of potential for Japan to deepen its relationships with each country in the Global South and build mutually beneficial partnerships. And this is increasingly important, I must say, in an increasingly multipolar world. Of course, many of today's challenges, such as pandemics, climate change, cybersecurity, poverty, inequality, these are all not confined within the borders of one country and are intrinsically linked to everyday lives. So, of course, from Japan's point of view, Japan has been engaging with the Global South long before the term Global South was even coined, and Japan marked 70 years of overseas development assistance in 2024. Japan has also been a pioneer in its diplomatic outreach to different regional groupings, such as ASEAN, with which Japan marked 50 years of ties last year. With Africa, it has held the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, or TICAD, since 1993, and the conference would again convene in Yokohama next year. Japan also has had a series of summits with Pacific Island leaders since 1997, the latest being this summer. Well, just this last week, Japan hosted a foreign ministers meeting with Caribbean nations. So what does this all mean for Japan, which has through the years been stressing a co-creation approach to development on the basis as equal partners with an aim of building a shared future that can resolve social issues on the national, regional, and ultimately global scale? And this can be seen in how Japan has been focusing its efforts on the Global South in terms of quality infrastructure. And this is, of course, both hard infrastructure such as bridges, ports, roads, schools, and transport networks, as well as soft infrastructure such as digital connectivity, cybersecurity, the transfer of know-how, building supply chain resilience, and human resources development. Underpinning all of this is Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific vision, which underpins the idea of equal partnership, whilst also defending principles such as the rule of law. And this, of course, has led to spin-offs and similar Indo-Pacific visions elsewhere in the world, be it in the US, European Union, and ASEAN. More recently, Japan launched its Asia Zero Emission Community, or AZEC, to work with member countries in Asia on their respective decarbonization journeys that take into account local circumstances rather than imposing a one-size-fits-all approach. To help us make sense of this very weighty topic, I'm happy to introduce our three panelists who will shed some light on the issue tonight. We have with us Dr. Nilanjan Ghosh, who is dialing in from Kolkata. He leads the Center for New Economic Diplomacy at the Observer Research Foundation in India, and he's a very busy man wearing many hats, such as a member of the Global Future Council on the Future of Nature and Security at the World Economic Forum. From Tokyo, we have Dr. Megumi Muto, who is a special advisor to the president at the Japan International Cooperation Agency, or JICA. Her focus is on sustainability and development finance, and she was JICA's first chief sustainability officer. And I believe she would have a lot to share about Japan's ODA journey later today. And joining us from Jakarta is Dr. Nuki Agya Utama, who I believe is still on the road, stuck in a jam, but is kind enough to still be with us today. He heads the Asia Zero Emission Center at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, or ERIA, and he has an expertise spanning areas such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, and green design. And he as well has experience working with the UNDP, or United Nations Development Program. So to begin, I would like to invite our panelists to share their initial thoughts, starting with Dr. Ghosh. Well, Dr. Ghosh, I understand that to Japan, India is an important partner, be it in the Quad, and it's also a very pivotal country in the Indo-Pacific. Yet India as well is a very key player in the Global South and hosted the Voice of Global South Summit just this August. I was hoping you could give us a sense of how Japan-India ties have evolved over the years and the potential going forward.
Thanks for that question, Walter. Uh, Japan and India have been natural partners for quite some time. In fact, they feature as two critical pillars of the Quad in the Indo-Pacific. And we need to remember that Japan and China are two of the most critical economies of Asia, among others. And more importantly, the geopolitical or the geoeconomic rise of India and its increasing importance as a critical representative, and also, in fact, the way it posed itself during the G20 as the voice of the Global South is the hallmark of the present decade. Therefore, when Japanese technical efficiency meets the vast human pool of India, global win-win solutions can emerge. Now, this has implications for not only North-South partnerships, but also for trilateral cooperation with Japan-India collaborating for helping the third nation, third economy of the Global South. But before I come to the dynamics, let us also have look at the background of the last 7-8 years, where we are encountering a cascade of and in fact, because you talked about the BRI and definitely the idea of the status quo in the global political and the economic order was challenged. Even after that, after China announced the BRI, with the emergence of strong leaders, the dominance of nationalistic fervors emerging from xenophobic discernment of some of the major nations, and also we find insulating tendencies of some economies that were once the major proponents of free market economies of globalization. And you find such insulating tendencies, in fact, in the US withdrawal from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the prolonged US-China trade war, the Brexit. Then we have, of course, the global shocks like the COVID-19. Then we have, in fact, that led to a realization that production chains need to be diversified beyond China. We have the supply chain crisis due to the Ukraine-Russia imbroglio, leading to commodity price inflation. And lately, we also have the conflictual outcomes at the Gaza Strip. Alongside, we also have developments of security blocks like the Quad in the Indo-Pacific. We also have the I2U2. We have trade blocks emerging and economic corridors like ASEC. And very recently, the India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor, which has also been discussed quite a lot. Amid this global geopolitical economic tempest, the partnership between India and Japan emerges not just as a beacon of mutual prosperity, but also as a cornerstone for regional stability and global economic growth. India has been a critical partner of Japan's FOIP free and open Indo-Pacific vision. And India has also presented an inclusive vision of the Indo-Pacific in the form of this acronym called SAGAR, or the SAGAR. Sagar essentially emerges from a Sanskrit or Hindi term, means ocean or the sea. And it is an acronym for security and development for all. Security for all. So, Indo-Japan economic relations are rooted in this three also into a comprehensive partnership. In 2011. Now, this agreement has been pivotal. It marked a new chapter in the two nations' bilateral ties, and it's not mainly the depth of the trade relations, but also the broad spectrum of investment and the industrial cooperation that has been the hallmark of this particular agreement in terms of its implementation. Now, if you very recently, the Indo-Japan Forum 2023 highlighted the evolving dynamics of this partnership with Japan's commitment to the FOIP strategy. The Japan-India Investment Promotion Partnership is another agreement between India and Japan to promote investment and trade between the two countries. So, and under that, we have the Japan Industrial Townships, we have the India-Japan Industrial Competitiveness Partnership. There have been footprints also, in fact, in the digital space, India-Japan Digital Partnership, and then the Clean Energy Partnership. This partnership was announced in 2022 to promote energy security and carbon neutrality. India has been the largest recipient of Japanese ODA loan for the past decades. And one of the biggest successful cases that have emerged and that stay in front of us is the New Delhi Metro, which is an example of Japanese cooperation through the utilization of this overseas development assistance. Japan has made extensive inroads in terms of the infrastructure investment in India's northeast, which has major connectivity problems. And the important thing that needs to be highlighted here is something that you rightly mentioned, quality infrastructure. However, I really feel that going forward, there is an immense opportunity where, in fact, the two nations can actually collaborate. That is in the form of, human capital. Japan's human capital is aging, whereas in India you have prevalence of a massive demographic dividend. India has the world's largest population right now, surpassing China, with 1.42 billion people. 65% of the population is in the working age group, that is between 15 to 64. More than 55% of the population is below the age of 30 in India. More than 50% of them is below the age of 35. So, and on the other hand, Japan's working age population has been on the decline since the 1990s. So, in that case, whereas Japan has been an economy which has largely been scarce in terms of natural resources, but even with limited natural capital, Japan actually grew on the back of skilled human capital. This is something to be noted. So Japan, and right now that the human capital or the human capital base is declining, Japan and India can get into a new form of agreement on human resource mobility or worker mobility from India to Japan. And labor mobility can actually connect potential workers from low-income countries to employers in high-income countries. So, so that can be a win-win situation. And parts of the global north, where you have in fact population declining, can also create this kind of a framework of labor mobility or migration, which can then and they can learn from this kind of an experience of Japan-India collaboration in terms of labor movement. So this is, of course, one of the ideas that came to my mind, which I felt that is relevant in the context of Japan-India relations in future. So let me stop there.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Ghosh, for helping us trace the trajectory of Japan-India relations, as well as India's receiving of Japanese ODA through the decades. And I thought that was a very interesting point, especially moving forward, looking at the opportunities for human capital and human resource exchanges between the two countries. And I was hoping that Dr. Muto from JICA could help pick up on that point, and perhaps give our audience an overview of JICA and how Japan's priorities towards ODA may have changed through the decades.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, co-panelists, and everyone online. Thank you for inviting JICA for this very important conversation. Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, is the aid agency and also the development finance institution of the Japanese government. We combine technical assistance, grant, sovereign and non-sovereign finance to support the development of our partner countries. For example, India, all under the category of Official Development Assistance, ODA. And for the past several decades, we had this overarching umbrella of human security, But one of the very important pillars has been to share the industrialization experience of post-war Japan to other economies in Asia. Sorry, maybe I'm going back a little bit too far, but I still remember the term the flying geese theory, prevalent like in the late 80s, aiming to support the takeoff of other neighboring countries towards high levels of growth. At the time, the typical model was structural transformation towards industrialization and, in particular, export-led growth. The recipe was a combination of infrastructure, still very important today, human resource development, improvement of investment-related policies, and developing of supporting industries like SMEs for inclusive growth. Vietnam, for example, after the announcement of Toi Moi, is a real great example. Now it's really a hub of very diverse supply chain networks. And JICA has mobilized all modalities for this purpose, like urban development together with infrastructure, special economic zones, and also investment in education. Okay, so then the typical, this typical model, we are realizing these days that we are in a world drastically different with a new set of challenges. Industrialization and growth produce positive but also negative externalities. The positive side is, as we have witnessed all over Asia, a lot of poverty reduction, but also negative externalities like triple planetary crisis, including climate change, loss of nature, and pollution. So this is the kind of like a new recognition these days. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit biased because I have been the first Chief Sustainability Officer of JICA, but we are just sharing that we are through this journey internally. So sustainability is one of the new shared directions. We need to recognize that human systems is within the Earth system. And our human system needs to push for a profound transformation to keep on coexisting with the Earth system. So positive externalities and impacts, that's really the two words that we are putting in the minds of every other JICA staff. I should not forget to mention that sustainability in JICA also includes gender and basic human rights, which are foundations of coexistence among human beings. In this regard, so just pursuing industrialization is outdated. The sharing of pathways of past development is no longer the answer. So to search what sustainability really means in each context and localities of our partner countries, our behavioral principle from now will be co-creation. That is very explicit in the new ODA charter. We sit down with our partners, listen to each other very well, and create synergies for innovation and together find new ways towards a sustainable future. So this is how we are redefining our roles in as a practitioner group, JICA, working together with various stakeholders from South and North together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muto, for that very good overview of JICA's excellent work over the decades. And I'm very excited to hear more about JICA's plans to pursue co-creation with other recipient countries going forward. But maybe let's keep that for later on. Right now, on the topic of environment and sustainability, since we're on that topic, I wanted to turn to Dr. Utama, who, as the chief of the Asia Zero Emission Center, could perhaps give our audience a sense of the current energy situation in Asia, and perhaps could you also share how this elusive goal of decarbonization may be achieved?
Thank you so much, Walter. I think it's a great honor to be part in this Asia Undercurrent webinar. As we delve into the critical issues shaping the future of energy in Asia, a region that stands at the crossroads of unprecedented opportunities and formidable challenges. Asia is undergoing rapid industrialization and urbanization, accompanied by population growth that continues to drive energy consumption to the new heights. The momentum shows no sign of slowing down, making it imperative for us to address the energy challenges ahead. This brings us to the pressing issues of decarbonization in Asia, and Southeast Asia alone, with its heavy related reliance on the fossil fuel-based energy structure up to 2050. The impact of this on our environment, economies, and communities is profound, highlighting the urgency of transitioning towards sustainable and equitable energy system. Yet, Asia's decarbonization journey is unique as the region itself. One-size-fits-all approach will not be sufficient, definitely. With its diverse economies, resources, and energy structures, countries at different stages of economic development, energy consumption patterns, and environmental challenges, it will also impacting the whole structures for the future landscape. Asia requires tailored pathways that respect the unique circumstances and priorities of each country while working collectively toward a common goal. ASEAN Zero Emission Community, or AZEC, is designed to function within this diversity by allowing flexible, context-specific strategies for decarbonization, technology adoption, supporting development needs, capacity building, and private sector involvement. AZEC is a significant regional initiative that addresses Asia's decarbonization needs by balancing technological, financial, and also policy solution in a way that respects the region's diversity. Through its flexibility framework, AZEC aims to create a collaborative and sustainable approach to achieving a net zero emission future for Asia. It recognizes the region's unique challenges and works to ensure that each country can play its part in the global fight against climate change. To this end, the Asia Zero Emission Community, or AZEC, was established as a regional initiative to navigate the complexities of these decarbonization strategies. And AZEC embodies the spirit of collaboration and innovation, bringing together countries to tackle shared challenges and leverage opportunities. At the heart of AZEC's vision lies the Asia Zero Emission Center, or AZE Center, which was inaugurated during the second AZEC ministerial meeting in August this year. The center is a significant milestone for our region, providing a comprehensive framework built upon 4 key pillars: developing decarbonization roadmaps tailored to regional and national contexts, driving sector-specific action to address energy transition in power, industry, and also transport, enabling markets by fostering regulatory frameworks, financial mechanism, and also technology access. And last but not least, fostering collaboration with diverse stakeholders, including government, industries, and also civil society. Therefore, this AZE Center stands as a beacon of hope and a platform for action, ensuring the Asia decarbonization pathways are innovative, inclusive, and also pragmatic. I'm stopping there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Utama, for a very enlightening presentation on what the Asia Zero Emission Center does. But I was just hoping to stay with you and perhaps for the benefit of our audience. When you say that, a one-size-fits-all approach is not sufficient and decarbonization in Asia requires diverse approaches, I was hoping you could perhaps give a specific example, maybe pertaining to Indonesia, as to how this diverse approach, how this different approach from the so-called one-size-fits-all technique would look like. Dr. Utama?
Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat again the question?
Oh, yes. Earlier on, you discussed the Asia Zero Emission Community and how it is necessary because a one-size-fits-all approach will not be sufficient, and decarbonizing Asia requires diverse approaches. And I was hoping you could help our audience understand this better by perhaps illustrating this with an example of how it might look like, maybe in Indonesia where you are based. What sort of, approach does Indonesia need to decarbonize Asia, and why does the one-size-fits-all approach not work?
Okay. The region is rich on the energy resources. We call it indigenous energy supply. Those are the main important resources that needed to be addressed to make sure that the energy mix in the future are really relying on the local resources, domestic resources. So rather than using these imported energy sources in the future, we have to really try to capture these domestic available local resources. So for Indonesia case, as a very good example, this country are rich with the baseload kind of energy, renewable energy resources like geothermal and hydropower. Those two are a very good baseload for power generation that need to be utilized optimally. While it's on these other sectors like transport sectors and thermal for industrial sectors, we do have some sort of fuel to replace imported oil. For example, we have abundantly available biomass, both in the form of solid biomass or liquid biomass, such as a bioethanol or biodiesel. So this kind of bioresources are very important in the country to really fulfill the need of the fuel demand and reducing the imported dependency from fossil fuel. So this kind of approach are, of course, not the same with other countries, for example, like Vietnam. Vietnam are rich with the wind potential as well as solar potential. So that kind of thing are very important for us to understand the localities, the potential of energy supply within the country itself. So by that, we can give countries to have some certain various pathways by their own, and with the Japan technology, we can work together to accelerate leapfrogging all of those technology to be more practical and more efficient in the future, and definitely will be more affordable. Thank you.
I see. Thank you so much for the clarification, Dr. Utama. And I thought that was a very interesting point, considering how, as you said, different countries have very unique circumstances pertaining to their own circumstances. And because of that, I'm just very curious as to how JICA approaches its work. And on that note, perhaps I could turn the attention to Dr. Muto. I was wondering if you could briefly talk us through JICA's process through the decades in terms of identifying these specific needs of the recipient countries, and what exactly does JICA do when it approaches a recipient country?
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe for this point, I will talk about how we are trying to take ourselves to the next level. And once again, the key word is co-creation, but also systemic level transformation. Sorry, once again, I'm in, my mind is very much in the sustainability kind of like a mindset. So I tend to use the words from these discussions. I mentioned the planetary crisis, climate change, nature, pollution. There are negative threats and risks, but could be taken as opportunities as well. And how to face these opportunities together with our partner countries and co-create something for the future. That is really the approach and the mindset that we are trying to guide the institution and the individuals inside. For example, yes, with this new set of risks, maybe we have opportunities to work together on leapfrogging to green resilience and smart infrastructure, and that is really recognized by all. Beyond the level of projects, we can also try to apply programmatic thinking about systemic bottlenecks. It's not just about this project, that project, but think more in sector-wide or nationwide terms, and really think about the best button to push towards the system level transformation. And forcing us to think like that. These new opportunities are changing inside JICA as well. For example, at the project level, we cannot work on green, resilient, and smart infrastructure if we divide the task to silos like transport, disaster risk reduction, and DX here. So within JICA, we are starting to work horizontally in a multi-sectoral way. And that will really be the modality when we sit down and talk with the partner stakeholders and countries. For example, one new technical assistance in Vietnam, there was a request for a greening of a special economic zone. Special economic zone, usually it's in the category of, the people who support industries, firms, but they really wanted to do something about pollution, circularity, and carbon neutrality. So people from different fields sitting together, and also these supporting the industries themselves come in. Plus, of course, our counterparts in the economic zones are really trying to bring different minds, but trying to come with this common solution on how to be greener together. So that is something that we are promoting. At the same time, once again, with regard to this system-wide transformation, we are not just looking into individual projects, but really trying to push the button that we need to push at the very beginning. For example, in Laos, we started with the capacity building around master planning of the transition of the whole energy sector. So this is more like a capacity building rather than detailed projects. So after that, we sent experts to build together a pipeline of priority actions or projects. And through the process, that dialogue identified a wind power project that will be exporting electricity to neighboring Vietnam to help Vietnam. Right. So the real bottleneck was in the system. It was really the capacity for planning and project formulation, not necessarily the lack of potential projects. And then the private sector came in. There was a public-private partnership, and the wind power project took off. So we are trying to look the system in a holistic way, and that needs a new set of recognition skills. It's not about sectors, it's not about disciplines, but we have to take ourselves to the next level. That's how we are trying to approach our stakeholders, partner countries, and going forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Muto. And I guess this also best exemplifies what the Japanese government means by when it talks about co-creation and when it talks about equal partnerships as well, isn't it? Because as you were saying, I suppose JICA listens to the voices of the recipient countries and incorporates the feedback into the projects as well. Turning to Dr. Ghosh and Dr. Utama, as being citizens of India and Indonesia, respectively, which are both prominent members of the Global South, I was just wondering, is there anything on your wish list that you hope Japan or JICA could be offering and supporting your respective countries or the Global South so as to achieve a greater growth? Perhaps Dr. Ghosh could take this question first.
Well, I presume that JICA is already doing that. Japan is already doing that, especially the infrastructure component. But see, this is now a concern from, I would say, a north-south kind of a dynamics that I'd like to look at things. If I look at the entire climate financing portfolio, I find that there is a clear bias towards financing mitigation projects or green transition projects as opposed to adaptation projects. So around 85 to 90% of the financing of most of the MFIs and DBs, and even in the context of ODAs, I find that most of it has traditionally gone into green transition or mitigation. But the fact remains that there is a huge adaptation financing gap. And if I look at the 2024 UNEP Adaptation Gap Report, it shows that it is just increasing over time. Right now, the adaptation funding gap for the developing countries stands at around 250 billion US dollar annually for this decade alone. Now, I presume that this is only tip of the iceberg. In fact, if you look at to actualize, if the financial injections required to actualize the domestic adaptation blueprints, they soar even higher, demanding a formidable, I presume, 380 odd billion annually. Now, despite the urgent call to action in public multilateral and bilateral adaptation finance to the global south, the cause is a concerning 15% drop in 2021 and 22. So this issue occurs primarily because adaptation projects do not reveal a perceptible ROI, return on investment. It is in the form of a public good. That is, when you talk about most of these energy transition projects, you can perceive a real ROI, an economic rate of return. Well, adaptation projects are largely associated with a high social rate of return, not really a perceptible economic rate of return. That is what it is all about. So naturally, there is a tendency, in fact, to ignore adaptation projects and get into mitigation projects. Well, I shouldn't say that Japan is not really doing that, but I presume that the injection from the north has to be more towards the adaptation project because it's the need of the hour for the global south, large parts of the global south, even for the emerging components, emerging nations like India. Even in India, you have varying levels of development. There are climatically vulnerable regions where you often need to move the population from the vulnerable region to the stable region, and this has been globally accepted as one form of adaptation. We call it strategic retreat. So naturally, if say India comes in this particular direction, then in fact we can really think about mitigation. Because in most cases, suppose the net zero targets are between 2045 and 2070. But before that, many of the archipelagos might be underwater. So we have to reach till the net zero target year. So we have to leave till that particular year. So naturally, one of the I would say requests, demands, or whatever way you put this, is that possibly we need to look at the broader social rate of return than looking at the long-term social rate of return than looking at the myopic short-term return on investment.
Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. Dr. Utama, do you have anything to add to that? Or do you agree with Dr. Ghosh's view on how adaptation versus mitigation and how that's a potential loophole in terms of financing?
Yes, I do have some sort of what I can call it the challenges basically in the moment energy transition. I want to talk about that. There are basically two major transition problem if we want to looking at the decarbonization in the energy sector. First is the transition in terms of the technology transition, and second of all is transition finance. So when you ask about how Japan can be really benefited on these matters, these two are really can be captured by Japanese to leapfrogging again the condition in terms of the energy transition in the region, in Asia as a whole, or Southeast Asia in specific manners. The energy transition in terms of technology are really very important to understand that the traditional kind of energy supply are basically based on the fossil fuel. The technology already mature enough and viable in the market easily. The personnel or the people who work on this area is already quite advanced in terms of mastering this technology. But in terms of the energy transition, is totally different realm. The technology itself are various. As I mentioned, technology should be also various, and looking at on the domestic kind of perspective, looking at the technology energy supply. So meaning that when we looking at the specific and diversification, we need a triple or even 4 times kind of knowledge, and people with the more variety kind of knowledge to really move forward on this energy transition. That's the energy in terms of the technology that we can really being helped by Japanese counterpart. And the second of all is the transition finance. It's not all the available financial globally are really looking at energy transition finance, looking at on this transition itself. They're looking at jump towards clean energy. So, but without the transition of finance, meaning that we go towards clean energy by having, for example, clean coal and efficient natural gas, those energy transition will not be happening. So we need those kind of all of this energy supply by make it more efficient in the more fossil fuel kind of technology, leading towards the production of more advanced technology for fulfilling the whole gap of energy transition energy itself in terms of technology. So transition finance have to looking at those as one of the important matters, not just only looking at they will finance something that 100% clean. Those are something that are not realistic at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your views. But I'm also thinking that any discussion about the global south cannot overlook China, which has not only positioned itself as the de facto leader of the global south and also has its massive Belt and Road Initiative. And that kind of leads me to my next question. I was thinking of posing this to maybe Dr. Ghosh. Given that India, like China, are founding members of BRICS, which now has 9 members and counting, and the 2 countries are also involved in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization as well. But given the growth and rise of such multilateral frameworks that are increasingly based on ideology beyond the geographical frameworks that have long been in existence, I'm curious as to how you see the benefits of these frameworks and how they can complement bilateral approaches.
So, I presume I'm audible clearly, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a tricky question, and issue is that how do we balance, China or the existence of China in various platforms? Well, we do. India does have some kind of border problem with China, and as far as BRICS is concerned, well, it has been pretty well balanced when it came to BRICS in terms of for many other reasons. Even in fact, even in G20, you can find the existence of these two large economies, large landmasses, in fact, in Asia. Well, now the issue is that when it comes to many other platforms, including, suppose, say, recent trade agreements, suppose, say, the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. As far as the RCEP was concerned, to my mind, one of the reasons why India actually exited this entire RCEP negotiations was the presence of China in the bloc, for 2 reasons. First of all, it was also the fact that by 2018-19, the trade deficit of China, the bilateral trade deficit with China accounted for 48% of India's overall trade deficit. And at the same time, the Chinese products almost invaded the Indian markets, as it is done, in fact, in many of the markets of the global south or in the global north as well. And second was that there were border problems, which also escalated at that point in time. There were also other reasons. Other reasons were there were apprehensions on what is going to happen to the domestic value chain as far as Indian commodities are concerned. So right now, India has not really disturbed the existing equilibrium in the context of the G20, in the context of the BRICS, in the context of, suppose, say, the Shanghai SCO. But as far as forming a new bloc, new trade bloc or economic bloc with China, India has not committed to that. that's why, in fact, it has always refrained from getting into any kind of agreement in a bloc where there is some kind of a Chinese presence. But one thing needs to be remembered here that it often so happens that there are products which often people buy, in fact, in India, without being aware that those are actually Chinese products. I mean, this is something very interesting. In fact, people buy iPhones thinking that they are products from maybe South Korea or whatever, but finally, in fact, they come to know that this is actually made in China. Or suppose say it's a Chinese investment made within India. So anyway, that is how things are right now. And so it's a critical game that is being played. But India is also trying to make its inroads, in fact, in the global value chain, as also creating its own trade blocks, like suppose say thinking of this large-scale economic bloc known as the IMEC, India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor, which is going to be a multimodal transport bloc, as also in fact creating an economic bloc in the form of economic bloc as also in fact renewable energy. It also consists of solar mission and green hydrogen. So and India is getting into bilateral trade agreements. If you look at it, especially in fact after it exited the entire RCEP negotiations, it went into bilateral trade agreements with the UAE, it went into bilateral trade agreements with Australia, bilateral trade agreements with smaller nations like the Mauritius. So there are plans, and it is also one of the bigger forces, given the fact that it has the highest economic growth rate in terms of the GDP growth among all the major economies of the world. And you won't find any other economy which can boast of a population size or a market size of 1.42 billion and whose incomes are growing at 6% or suppose to 7% levels.
Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. And before jumping to audience questions, I wanted to finally turn to you again, Dr. Muto. Given forecasts that India and ASEAN could overtake Japan in terms of GDP by 2030, and acknowledging the fact that Japan has issues of its own, such as its low birth rate, I wonder if this economic decline might affect Japan's approach to ODA going forward into the future. If Dr. Muto, you could share some thoughts about that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but let me just share my personal impressions on some trends that is happening. Maybe you have heard about the Japanese volunteers program. This has been from the start of Japan's ODA, and it's really, really a robust program that is the foundation for human-to-human exchange and understanding among countries, societies, and people. Before that program was really kind of like one way. Japan sending young, energetic minds to remote places so that they can experience together with the village community the kind of like a bottom-up development. That was really the modality. But now we are seeing many variations. These volunteers come back to Japan and also contribute to the bottom-up redevelopment of Japanese rural communities. And these are kind of like a very appreciated in the localities in Japan. So you see these dynamics that ODA, not in its original kind of like definition expected, it is bringing in a very positive flow of not just people, but together with that entrepreneurship, businesses, and maybe new types of like exchanges, not just cultural, but businesses as well. So I'm noticing that there's a department dedicated to that already in JICA, and that is the start of a new pathway. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muto. And I do have several questions from the audience that have come in. So if we could get through as many of them as possible, it would be great if we could get through as many of them as possible. So let's just jump right into it. The first question, I guess, would be for Dr. Utama. The question is from a consultant in the United States. He or she is asking, what specific achievements has the Asia Zero Emission community made so far, and what are some of the milestones looking for the future? Dr. Utama, if you could take that question, please.
Thank you so much, Walter. Very good question indeed. The AZEC community itself is already make some MOU between business sectors in both Japan and Southeast Asia companies. So this kind of MOU are mostly on the research stage on how to move forward and mastering the technology itself based on the both condition perspective. So, for example, Japanese company approaches on how to increase hydrogen production, and countries and business sectors in Southeast Asia, they are rich with the hydropower to produce hydrogen. So this kind of cooperation are happening right now, and mostly the state-owned enterprises with also together with the Japanese enterprises. So there are some lists that I can't really remember one by one, but those activities are happening, and in the end of the year we all will report this result to the during the leaders meeting in the end of October next year. So and I think these 350 plus kind of MOU are giving a very solid stepping stone toward how to decarbonize the industrial sectors, power sectors, type of sectors in the region by the help of this technology transfer. Not only technology transfer, but also collaboration and cooperation coming from the Japanese counterpart.
Thanks, Dr. Utama. And now turning to you, Dr. Ghosh, from the geopolitical perspective, there's a question from several viewers on what you might see as the major implications for Japan and the Global South with President Trump 2.0 coming.
Well, I can see that it is expected that the trade war is simply going to get further accentuated, the tariff wars between US and China. This is going to have some implications for some of the Asian nations, the emerging nations in Asia. There will be the China plus one, which a strategy that was followed by many corporations, in fact, especially in the post-COVID era or during the COVID era. It is diversifying their production chain away from China and moving to destinations like Vietnam, India, and South Korea. This is going to increase. So on the one hand, I presume that the growth forces are going to emerge from the emerging economies. There will be a possibility of some kind of global slowdown and global upheaval created by the US-China trade war as it created earlier. And second is that from the smaller economies, I presume that there will be some kind of an impediment of labor movement as well, especially which is going to be, I mean, if from many of the smaller South Asian economies, there have been movements, in fact, to US and some of the other developed world, which are not really legal or official movements. Those are going to be ranked substantially, given the change in dispensation. So this is something that I really expect in terms of the global trade and the global economy.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Ghosh. And turning to you, perhaps Dr. Muto, for the next question. A lot has been talked about equality in the context of cooperation with the Global South, but how can real equality or how can real equal partnerships be achieved when countries in Asia have such diverse and different circumstances? This question comes from a researcher from Malaysia. Dr. Muto, could you address that, please?
Thank you very much for this very deep question. I understand that ASEAN itself recognizes the differences and varieties among member countries, but keeps coherence, keeps the dialogue, and moves forward. I personally learned so much from that. I don't know if this level is correct, but the Asian way of consensus building. And I think together with our increased willingness to sit down and really co-create, we can navigate together into the next set of challenges. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Muto. Perhaps I would like to twist that question around and ask Dr. Ghosh and Dr. Utama, what do you see the idea of an equal partnership looking like? Maybe Dr. Utama, would you like to take that first?
Equal partnership, very famous in the energy sector. We call it the just energy transition, a fair or just. So that's something that currently we try as much as possible to do that by having some sort of various pathways, giving the countries to really design and plan their own energy transition direction without any kind of sort of force them to do some certain of energy transition direction. So that's one of the way that the just energy transition can be applied. We all understand that each of the countries have their own various type of energy supply, as I mentioned previously. This just energy transition need to really respect and endorse those to be the next or the future backbones of their future energy structure, definitely for their energy mix. And the other part as the same as important as the technological pathways, this as also I mentioned is the financial. So the financial support not only looking at on the some certain kind of technology, but should also provide all spectrum of energy technology. That definitely can be called as a just energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Utama. And Dr. Ghosh, what does equality in the context of cooperation with the Global South mean in India and to yourself?
To a certain extent, I would call it moving from the terminology of development assistance to development partnership. When we think about this entire paradigm shift, we are talking in terms of a certain amount of equality. So it is not a heavy-handed top-down approach by the donor. It is rather understanding the local nuances sitting across the table. So what is the need of the recipient economy? Understanding that. So at times it has so happened in many of the donor economies who have come to, suppose, say, in South Asia, they come with this idea that, okay, fine, we want to invest in green transition, we want to invest in solar, we want to invest in electric vehicles, we want to invest in XYZ, which are, but possibly we need adaptation funding. And just putting this across. So naturally, maybe in fact they need something on poverty reduction, poverty alleviation, or something else. They need something on infrastructure for growth. So understanding the needs and eventually catering to the needs of the recipient nation. And that is also, in fact, so it is not that the donor shouldn't be telling the recipient that this is what you need. To me, this is what we mean by an equal partnership. That is one. The second is, I presume, you brought this up, issue of partnership or development partnership up here, and posed this question to me. I presume that Japan and India, they have matured enough in terms of their partnerships to get into a model of trilateral partnership. So maybe, in fact, the financial muscle of Japan and to say the digital public infrastructure. This is some success story in India. Can this model be replicated in another global south economy, say like Maldives or suppose say in some an African economy, but Japan also intends to have a footprint. So India has the technical knowledge, technical know-how. Japan has the financial muscle, and can in fact they together get into an equal partnership with another global south nation, and in the process lead to some kind of an overall win-win situation for all.
Right, and that's really an aspiration that countries should be working towards. Going back to you,
So it's a
Dr.
north-south,
Right.
north-south-south kind of a framework.
Right. I totally agree with you on that. And going back to you, Dr. Utama, this question is specifically about decarbonization, and it's from several viewers. They are asking if you think the current geopolitical situation, be it on the Korean Peninsula, be it in the Middle East, could change the confidence with which Japan is partnering with the Global South for efforts in decarbonization. What do you think about that?
Sorry. Meaning that the current condition in terms of these decarbonization strategies in the region itself is cannot be looking at partially. So honestly speaking, in my opinion, that the decarbonization pathway should be a global initiative, not only ASEAN initiative, not only a Japan ASEAN initiative, not only a China ASEAN or even India China, whatever it is. No, this decarbonization strategies, it should be a global cooperation because of the various technology that we need to possess is not something that available overnight. The technology itself is very challenging to be reliable. If country by country or region by region working in siloed mode. So in my opinion, geopolitics will make it worse in terms of the pushing the pathways into more decarbonized kind of society. One of very good example is that people are looking at battery as a solution in the transport sectors. Our study revealed that if we rely on the battery in the transport sectors with the current pace, in approximately in 2050, all of the country will fight over minerals. And those not a very good news, meaning that we're going to repeat the same problem when we fight over oil and gas. So there will be no sustainability. Yes, people think that it will decarbonize our fuel transport sectors, but in the end, we fight over something that, in fact, we know now that it's going to be happening. So I think, yes, we need to really understood the scale, and we need to have to make a really collaboration. I know his collaboration is mentioned many times, but that's not only the magic word, but it is something that we have to do it. Not looking at only this the geopolitics will be the only important matters that we have to consider, but yeah, we have to really understand that decarbonization is the work of the all stakeholders globally.
Thank you for your views, Dr. Utama. There is another question from a professor from the Philippines, and I think this should be addressed to Dr. Muto. So the question is, given that Japan has been engaging with the Global South in so many ways, but what exactly is Japan learning from these countries, and how can the relationship become even more balanced? Dr. Muto, please.
Thank you very much. Maybe I just share my personal kind of like inner story. For example, last week I was in Morocco, sitting in a type of a global conference of really the South, talking about Southfulness and also about climate. And if I'm in that conversation, I really feel that the voices from the South are really asking our determination, willingness to act on climate, and not kind of try to explain why we are not fulfilling for example, the previous $100 billion goal. So we hear constantly this question of, are we determined to work together, for example, on climate? These are the lessons that I personally get as a practitioner. And with that, I'm also, with that kind of like input, I see the project, for example, energy projects, all other very critical mitigation projects, and ask ourselves, are we really listening to these voices? So that's a kind of like a iteration that we are having in our inner professional souls as a result of conversation with the South. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Muto. The next question comes from someone in the industrial sector from the Philippines, and I think it's best that Dr. Ghosh addresses this. How does Japan's infrastructure compare to mega projects such as China's Belt and Road Initiative?
First of all, if I talk about the pure value system involved in this, well, this is my personal opinion. Let me put this across. I reckon China as a market imperialist force. BRI is simplifies that. So when it comes to Japan, it has largely been, I would say, it has a more of a human approach. You talk about quality infrastructure. Japan has now expanded this, or the value system that is involved is much more people-centric. That has been one of the most critical elements or the critical pillars of Japan's investment. As far as China is concerned, China's BRI has largely been motivated to exploit the cheap factor market, largely, in fact, wherever you find cheap natural capital and cheap human capital, and eventually putting money for physical capital, so that they can enhance their own inclusive wealth in the form of exploiting the natural capital and the human capital, and binding them together with the physical investing in physical capital. Now, this has also been motivated by the fact that China by itself tried to move towards a consumption-driven growth phenomenon ever since their 13th and as has been documented in the 13th and the 14th five-year plans. Now, if you look at the Chinese wages and salaries after 2007-8, they have been increasing. I mean, they have increased manifold. So if you have to promote consumption-driven growth, then your wages and salaries of the purchasing power has to increase. But in that case, what happened was China realized that they were losing out on one very critical element, that is cheap human capital, which actually made their exports competitive in the global market at one point in time. So if they're losing out on that competitiveness, then they have to look out for destinations where you find cheap human capital or cheap natural capital. So that is why, in fact, they attempted South Asia, they attempted Africa, and tried to exploit that cheap human capital and the cheap natural capital to remain competitive in the export market, in the international market in the long run. And that is what, in fact, motivated this entire vision of BRI, which was, in fact, being manifested in large parts of the world. In fact, many of the small nations actually thought that as the second Marshall Plan, which it is not. To me, in fact, it is simply the market. I would call it the market imperialist design of one particular economy.
Right.
So that is the difference between Japan and China, to me.
I see. Thank you very much for your frank and candid opinions, Dr. Ghosh. And I think we have time for one last question. And this perhaps should go to Dr. Utama. And if either Dr. Ghosh and Dr. Muto would like to jump in, please feel free as well. There has been a lot of talk about sustainability and growth. So the question is, how is it possible for Global South countries to pursue both at the same time? Dr. Utama, could you take that first?
Yes, thank you, Walter. Definitely energy trilemma is something that we've been around for many years, and people are struggling, countries are struggling how to make it balance on the economic growth, sustainability, and energy security. With the strong commitment in terms of how to impose the economic growth while maintaining sustainability and energy security, the government needs to work very hard on how to really understand the whole concept of energy itself, not partially, not looking at only how to make money out of it, not looking at only how to secure the energy supply, but it is very holistic kind of approach that the government need to do. And definitely, I think, in my opinion, Global South having a big possibilities to achieve this target because of the region. This region have a lot of or abundantly available resources to fulfill those needs. Definitely, I think something that it is plausible to do, but again, most importantly, how the government have a strong commitment to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Utama. We are running short of time, but if Dr. Ghosh and Dr. Muto would like to chime in, you have 30 seconds to give a quick take to that question.
Well, I really don't think, in fact, in today's world, we can really have a debate on how we essentially reconcile the trade-off between sustainability and growth. This debate happened, in fact, at least 10 years ago. Given the fact that we are going to go green, we need to talk about green growth. So, and green jobs are going to be the next big thing. So, that is going to be my question. But at the same time, we need to get out of this entire very reductionist and myopic growth-centric definition of development. But that is, of course, going to emerge over time.
Right, thank you, Dr. Ghosh. And Dr. Muto, you can have the last word if you
Yeah,
have anything to say.
Very quick. Get it right on energy and transport. These are the growing needs for policy discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muto. And we have certainly had a very stimulating discussion tonight about the Global South and Japan's partnerships with countries in the Global South, as well as how its approach has evolved through the years. Thank you to the audience for staying with us through to the end, and it would help us so much if you could complete a post-webinar satisfaction survey, as we are always looking to improve this webinar series. You'll find the link if you scroll down, and we will deeply appreciate if you could fill that out. Lastly, I would like to thank our co-hosts, the Government of Japan and Nikkei, and please do stay tuned for the next and final webinar of the 4th season of the Asia Undercurrent webinar series, and that will take place in the first quarter of 2025. Until then, here's wishing everyone a very happy festive season and a wonderful year ahead. Goodbye.